we have lost the foundational idea that certain things are right and certain things are wrong, and it's not political.
Yeah.
And that when something is wrong, it is not cancel culture or being woke to hold that person accountable.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Before You Speak podcast. I am your host, Derek Peterson, just processing the fire hose of my news feed with this guy over here.
Hey, everybody, I'm Elwyn, and this week the fire hose of my news feed is about to be nationalized.
Nationalized, or is it gonna get taken through a process where then it gets hidden by the DOJ and
Well, nationalized, and I'm hoping to get an investment of $400 or $500 million from some rich people in the UAE.
Yeah, nationalized, and then maybe we can just skew the data to say whatever we need it to say later. Is that what we're
Well, we'll
looking
just
for?
take every other podcast off the air.
Yeah, that's this is the one true podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every other podcast that you've listened to, that was actually our podcast. And so
That's right.
all of those plays belong to us. So give them back now, please.
That's right. Thank you.
No, today we're going to talk about, let's start with interesting news coming out of Texas. A Texas Senate seat went to a Democrat, Taylor Remmett, who beat Leah Wambach. I don't know how to say her last name.
Wambach not in office anymore.
Yeah. But that's a seat that's been held by Republicans since the 90s and flipped blue. There's some interesting data on this. And one of the things I found interesting about this was, and I think Democrats need to pay attention to this moving forward, because I think it's a sign of what's happening. There's a couple things going on, right? I think, and I've seen this in my own personal life, that there are some people that are now starting to distance themselves from this administration a little bit more based on two things: what's happening with ICE and what's going on with the Epstein files. So for the first time, I've had some of my Republican friends actually come to the table and be like, man, I don't know that I can back some of this anymore, which is, to be honest, is great. But the statistical, what actually happened with this district is interesting, because so this district is typically 60% Republican, 10% I think independent, and then, or maybe 50% Republicans and 10% independent, 40% Democrat. Normally Republicans historically go out and vote in higher volumes. What was interesting is in this election, if you break it down by the numbers, so 23% of Democrats, so 23% of that 40% went out and voted. And of the Republicans, they're 50%, only 13% of their constituents in that district went out and voted. So this was not the landslide that the Democrats make it out to be, in the sense of oh, we're crushing these elections by 14 points. This is Republicans staying home. And granted, both can be the same thing. I know where you might say that staying home is also to some degree equal to not, could be casting your vote in one direction or another, depending on what you think is going on. But it's not the activism that you really want to see in this situation, where you see more and more people getting out to vote. It's less people voting, and specifically less Republicans voting, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I don't care. I think that this was every bit a landslide. This is a 30-point swing in 2 years. If you look at the United States House district that this area maps over, and yeah, you're right. It's a special election, and turnout is always low in a special election. And in 2028 or 2026, later this year, because Taylor Remmett has to run again, you will expect to see with the governor's election and with the Senate election, you'll expect to see higher turnout across the board. But depressed turnout on one side is still notable and important
Yeah.
because, yeah, people can vote with their seats. Your friends, they may not get out and vote Democratic, but they also might not vote at all. A 30-point swing is unbelievable. And this was not an election that was off the radar of the national political parties. Trump weighed in, gave his endorsement. I think Republicans had spent like $2 million on it. And which for, again, a state Senate seat is an incredible amount of money.
Yep.
And if you go back like 5 years, 4 or 5 years, this area is South Lake and Keller and areas like suburban, wealthy suburbs of Dallas. Really good high school football. These were areas where the school board elections in the last 5 years were national news, where you had national news because some of the school boards were saying, "Oh, you have to tell the both sides of the Holocaust." Right. You have to teach both sides of the Holocaust. This is the
Mm.
same place. That was the Keller ISD school district. This is the same place. So for a district like that, for that population to have this type of swing, I mean, look, it won't be 30 points, but that breakdown you just gave, having everybody turn out does not result in a 30-point swing the other way. Now, the Democrat might lose his seat, right? It
Yeah.
might make up the margin of victory, but if you're Republicans, you have to be looking at this and shitting your pants
Oh, they are.
because yeah,
Yeah.
this is losing most of Texas. This type
Yep.
of swing, even and if you just, I think if you took this exact swing and mapped it over 2026, they lose every House seat. So you have to, of course, adjust for that. But
Yeah.
even if you adjust for that down, you're still, gerrymandering aside, this is just flashing red lights. And I think that people just are starting to be like, no, man, it's not about Democrat or Republican. All this bullshit is wrong.
Yeah.
There's actually some optimism in that. That I feel we're gonna be like pretty dark the whole rest of the time. So like I'll note some optimism there.
Yeah, well, that brings us into the next topic, which is just, we have the FBI and taking raiding the Fulton, Georgia election office, taking basically everything. And the interesting thing about this, and the thing that I was listening to today that kind of made me start to think a little bit further was, we don't know which judge gave them the warrant to do all of this, but they basically have had to have. There has to be like a legal case to be made for them to do this, right? From my understanding, which means that they're what they're saying is potentially coming after this is them attacking somebody for fraud or something else, because the only way for them to go in and seize all these things is to basically open up a criminal case or something of the like. And so I didn't really know that prior to, and I was like, oh, that's going to be interesting. I was curious your take on all that.
Yeah, I read this very, very quickly. I think that the first judge that they put this in front of said no. And a number of FBI and AUSA people, assistant U.S. attorneys, have resigned from this because of this. And I think that the second judge, almost definitely a Trump appointee, and I think he also used to be a part of the U.S. Attorney's office under Trump. So, like, I don't read anything into that they got a warrant. They just found the right judge to get the warrant. But
Yeah.
the whole thing, like, why is Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, uh, part of this raid? They have no oversight over election or, over election interference claims or criminal acts regarding an election. That's the FBI. Why is she calling Donald Trump in the middle of the raid and getting him on the phone? Uh, the whole thing, like fucking five alarm fire, right?
Yeah.
Because Trump comes out the next day and says, yeah, we need to nationalize elections, and comes out the day after and says, yes, in 15 states we should be nationalizing elections. Look, that I have come down a little bit off of my like, oh my God, he's going to steal all the elections, uh, you know, nightmare fuel because when you look at how the elections in this country are run, they are run on a local basis, right? They're run in the counties, they're run
Yeah.
in the cities and in the states. They are decentralized. So even if you hack Fulton County, which they didn't, I mean, how many times do we have to listen to the former Republican Georgia Secretary of State talk about this? Uh, but even if they hack a county, the rest of the state does not necessarily mean was not necessarily hacked, right? The whole election was not necessarily hacked. Utah Republicans just did a study of like many years of election returns looking for election fraud. They found one. They found one
Yeah.
case in millions and millions and millions of votes. Election fraud is a problem that does not exist. It's just that simple. So all this is just being used as a pretense to do what he's saying they're going to do, nationalize elections. And that is a fucking disaster. It's first of all against Article 1 of the Constitution, which sets forth the rules. He doesn't have the power to do this, but we all know that doesn't matter, right? But
Yep.
that is directly undermining our democracy. And that is a piece of news that, like, buried in all of this shit as they flood the zone, that's a pretty big one.
Yeah. No, it's a huge one. And this is what we talked about it before, and I'm not going to get in depth with it, but the Ben Rhodes book, I can't remember the title of the book, but he talks about Viktor Orban's, uh, you know, uh, basically rise of authoritarianism and how to destroy democracy, and every step of everything that's happening right now, you can see it literally playing out in real time. And the next our next subject, which is the Epstein files, is feeds right into this, because it's, again, another piece of flooding the zone, but beyond that, protecting the people that are loyal to you and that are giving you money. And even though those people, and this whole situation is mind blowing, because for me, two reasons. One, they literally ran on exposing these files, like literally ran on, like, hey, we're going to release the Epstein files for everybody. Then we get to this place, and Trump's personal lawyer is, the guy that's coming out, and the same guy that, walked Ghislaine Maxwell into a minimum security prison, is the guy that's telling us, hey, there's nothing else to see here. Meanwhile, the 2 million additional pages of redacted video and redacted documents are basically what they're telling us now is, like, you're not going to see them. So a couple things here. Let's start with a why are these files just now coming out, and b, who was Epstein in the first place, and why is this important?
Yeah, so the Jeffrey Epstein, if we go back to 2008, was when he was first prosecuted for sex trafficking, of a minor in Florida, and allegations against him go back years before that in Palm Beach. The FBI has records of complaints, and a lot of what came out in the Epstein files comes from those complaints.
Yep.
Uh, but he got a sweetheart deal from then AUSA Alex Acosta, who wound up being the Secretary of Labor in Donald Trump's first administration. Uh, and then in around 2019, a new investigation was opened. That was the one that ultimately led him to be arrested, thrown into jail. And that investigation, even though we'll say he died in jail in 2020 uh, or 2019, because of Ghislaine Maxwell, that investigation was still ongoing. And it's basically kind of long held a truism, and it makes sense that while an investigation is ongoing, those files are held under seal, and I believe there was a court order holding them under seal. So, by the letter of the law, Biden could not release them. That
Well,
investigation ended in 2025.
yeah, and that's important to note, because look, I mean, the assumption with that is that if there are other people in those files that are com- complicit and being investigated, we don't want them to flee, right? Like, there is, like, so that those files being under lock and key while ongoing investigations are still happening, like, that's a critical part of our the structure of our law, and why things operate the way they do. Because if it leaks that all these people are in the files, all these really important people, they all start moving money and moving assets and find themselves places that are outside of the country where they can't, and then, and cut ties and go. And a lot of the people we're talking about have the means to probably disappear themselves and never be found. So, there's good reason why these should have been, under lock and key.
Yeah, and there is reputational harm. Just because something is being investigated doesn't mean that everybody that pops up in that investigation is guilty. You
Yeah.
know, Katie Couric is in the Epstein files that were released because she was at a dinner with Jeffrey Epstein, and her name popped up in an email as an attendee to the dinner. She's not. There's no criminal action there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of reasons why these things should be kept under seal. That is ultimately the legal reason why they were not uh, available until then. Now, why the other 3 million? Why Todd Blanche is just sitting there saying, "No, you're not going to get them." Uh, well, why not, man? Like, why not?
We're,
I thought the law said you would release them all.
Yeah, it never ceases to amaze me that the people that are all about law and order, and the people that are literally right now saying, like, justifying, shooting, American citizens for, carrying a gun and peaceful protesting, just follow the law. Just listen to them. Just, do whatever they say. Just follow the law. If you're following the law and order, right? Law and order is what's important to all of us. Meanwhile, out the other side of their mouth, they're protecting a ring of pedophiles and child rapists unlike we've ever seen before. And we all know it. Dude, those emails, like, you cannot read some of those emails that came into Jeffrey Epstein, and it's like, who sent this? Whoever sent this email needs to be investigated. This is an admission of guilt. Like, those emails, like are literally, some of them are like them, people admitting crimes essentially to Jeffrey Epstein, and we're just being told, like, sorry. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know how to
you
process that.
you can't say nobody is above the law if you are looking at these allegations and saying anything short of we need to devote more resources to follow up on them.
Yeah.
Right. That is, if there's an allegation out there that, multiple bodies of children are buried on the back nine of a golf course in California, that needs to be investigated. If there's an allegation that the entire Trump family and Jeffrey Epstein were at a calendar girl party, right, where they're rating girls based on their tightness, that shit needs to be investigated. Where there's a sworn statement under penalty of perjury from someone saying that they heard Donald Trump threaten to have I think a 12-year-old girl killed like the other one, that shit needs to be investigated. Uh, Either that or yeah, no, there is a certain level at which you're above the law. And the thing about it is like I don't want to be all like high and mighty. My goal, I've told people this for years. My goal somehow would be to be rich enough that the laws no longer apply to me, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Because we all know that there's a place that when you're rich enough, there's a number at
Yeah.
which point the laws no longer apply to you.
Yeah.
Okay. The problem with all this is that I think people kind of thought like, yeah, all right, the 2008 Wall Street collapse, financial crimes, bullshit like that. And it's not bullshit, right? You take down the world economy, it's not bullshit. But like these things that are, you know, whatever, that's okay, you're above the law for that. I hate it and it should change, but I'm never gonna be like fired up. But this shit, like, no, the decades-long systematic rape of children and trafficking of children amongst the world's most powerful people, made possible by a guy with connections in multiple national intelligence agencies, made possible by his wife, whose father was, a known associate of many, many drug runners and, well known to be in bed with the Mossad. Like, this is the guy that's involved in all of this. This is the most open and shut case of throw everybody under a microscope put that fucking old movie spotlight on them and make them sweat under interrogation for 7 weeks
Yeah,
until everybody that committed a crime goes to jail. This should be easy. This should be easy.
it should be easy. And do you know what is even crazier? And this is a total, you know, offshoot and conspiracy ish theory, but I'm going to put it out there because it's actually very interesting and the timing kind of aligns. Do you know who started Bitcoin? So there's a guy named Satoshi Nakamoto
Yeah.
is who
Okay.
is historically, although he's not a
Nobody's ever
person.
found him. Right.
Yeah,
Nobody's ever found him.
he's not a person. He's connected to essentially a group of people that started a with the intention of starting Bitcoin as being a way to pay other people without there ever being a track record of those payments. Like it's meant to be something that can't be traced and that's privatized for a specific reason. And there are a number of people now that investors that have come out and there's two videos that I've seen recently, and I don't know, I didn't take the time to verify who they were, but it did get me thinking, like, a lot of this stuff tracks because if Bitcoin, like this actually, one, Trump's buy-in to cryptocurrency on the back end and what they're doing with it, all of this tracks the anonymity behind it. But two, you know, these people were very clear that like if people ever actually knew who started Bitcoin, there's a good chance its value goes back to zero. Like there's not you people would want nothing to do with it. And to me, I'm like, yeah, like, you know, oh, randomly in 2008 and 9, a currency that you can't track that's being used in that's being started in parts of the world where some of the, you know, craziest stuff is happening just tends to pop up. I'm like, all right, like I think it needs to be investigated. I think like this stuff needs to be like all
Yeah.
of this stuff
Why
is
not?
happening. Yeah, if there
Like,
should not
the,
be a currency that we can't track if it's being used for child trafficking. Like
yeah.
that.
The thing that all this exposes, right, is this idea that it's been around forever, and frankly it's at the root of like every anti-Semitic conspiracy theory ever, that there's a secret group of people who get together in Bilderberg or in Davos or wherever, and they're who control the world. And the QAnon folks, they were like, yes, and they're trafficking children through the basement of a pizza parlor in Maryland that doesn't even have a basement. uh to know it's all, once you look at the Epstein files for 8 seconds, it's all right in front of you, right? It's
Yeah.
all mixed up with this guy as the center of the hub, right? You have him had close connections to former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, connecting Barak, who was also the director of the Mossad, to Peter Thiel so that he could look into Palantir. You have him talking to a Russian spy who is now handling the negotiations on the Russian side for the Ukraine situation. You have all of this stuff running through this one guy, Bill Gates, Richard Branson, everybody.
Yeah.
So yeah, nothing sounds ridiculous anymore. And the really, really dangerous part of it is that there's no grounding the criminality of it, because nobody's being accused of a crime. Nobody's actually facing any consequences. And I think that, we could rage about all the allegations that have come out. And, hopefully a lot of people will rage about the 3 million documents that we're apparently not going to see. But to me, there's this other question of like, where does this, what is, if we take a snapshot today of American society, 72 hours after the release of all this stuff, what does that snapshot show about our leaders, how we hold our leaders to account, what we demand of ourselves, and do we have any moral or ethical compass whatsoever as a country? And I think that's a really, really interesting conversation to have.
Yeah, well, you're seeing it in real time, right? Like, look at the world's response to the Epstein files. We have the UK is now investigating somebody because of their participation in the Epstein files. Poland, Lithuania, and France have all opened investigations on different people and companies that may have interactions in those files. So basically everybody but the US is looking at these, and to some degree looks like they're at least trying to take it a little bit more seriously. But like to me, I'm like, I liken this a lot more simpler conversation. Like, if you were cheating on your spouse, right? And your spouse like walks up to you and they're like, "Are you cheating on me?" Like, and the response to them asking you if you're cheating on them, like, why would you ask me that question? That's such a dumb question. Are you cheating on me? Like, if you basically do what this administration is doing by responding to that question by just trying to demean and demoralize the other person, is like, human nature just tells me that you're hiding something. Like, this is a foundational thing that I try to teach my kids. Like, as they're getting older, when they lie and I catch them in a lie, I walk them through this process, the defensiveness, the keeping things from me, because these are critical aspects of life, right? Building honesty through it. But they do the same things, the same behavior. It's deflection and defensiveness, and it's at the core, it's just an immature response to being guilty of doing something. But you the hope is that with my kids, we address it at an early age so they start to feel confident to tell the truth as they get older and own their own crap. And what we're seeing right now is we have a government full of people that own nothing and are unwilling
But
to
what
do
do,
anything
but
about it.
what do we demand of them? Like, what are we as a society demanding of this right now? Like, I think that this is a problem, and I'm gonna hone in on Peter Attia for a second, because that was one when his name came out. I was like, "Oh, this is a really interesting one. This is not a Davos man. This is not a Bilderberg, you know, core circle of 12 guy,
And some of the
who
stuff he was saying in those emails was, whew.
well, he knew, right? Like, it is not at all hard to draw the conclusion that he knew what Epstein was doing. He said, the hardest thing about being your friend is knowing what an outrageous life you live and not being able to tell anybody about it. Man, you got to answer some questions about that. But and I'm not going to like go into a Peter Attia apology because I'm not an apologist. The interesting thing about him is, like, he should lose his job at CBS. This should not be controversial. Okay. You know, he this should be easy, right?
Yeah,
But he's not going to. Barry Weiss doesn't want him to. She's digging in because she's anti-cancel culture. It is not cancel culture to say, hey, man, we're putting you on our airwaves in front of millions of people. We want to know that you have a certain moral character. And yeah, where you draw that line is critically important. Him having an affair with his wife, sorry, cheating on his wife. No, you shouldn't get fired for that. That's drawing the line too far. But knowing that the world's greatest pedophile, and this was in 2016, so Epstein had already been
yeah,
convicted, right? Knowing what Atia seems to have known, like, yeah, bro, should not be on CBS. This should be easy. But we're so fucked up in this country that we have this debate about whether or not it's cancel culture to tell a guy who has like 8 podcasts, many books, and 10,000 outlets to speak what he wants to say, to think that kicking him off of CBS is somehow cancel culture. No, it isn't. It's not. It's accountability.
yeah.
That's what it is, right? You may not have committed a crime, right? There's no evidence that he committed a crime, but it's accountability. And we seem just wholly unable to grasp the basic fact that people should be held accountable. And this is 30 years after multiple cabinet nominees in Bill Clinton's administration had to withdraw because they hired illegal or nannies that didn't have their papers. They were forced to resign. And now we can't tell CBS, no, this is obvious. Of course, Peter Tia should not be on the air. Like, what are we demanding as people when we allow this shit to be waved away? This should be a like torches and pitchforks moment. This is a more heinous crime to me than murder,
Yes.
right? this is amongst the most heinous crimes ever. And no, not everybody committed child rape here. Okay, but enough people did, and enough people knew about it, that for us to just, say like, okay, good, wow, it's awful what's in these allegations, and start to move on. No, like, we have lost the foundational idea that certain things are right and certain things are wrong, and it's not political.
Yeah.
And that when something is wrong, it is not cancel culture or being woke to hold that person accountable. The line is not conviction. The line for accountability in the public, in certain ways, is not conviction. Okay. Bill Gates lost his wife. She was on a podcast this week. He was going to do some awful shit. And she
Yeah.
found out about it and she was like, fuck you, divorced.
Yeah.
Okay. That he deserves every bit of that and more. He deserves to be kicked off of boards. And Peter Attia was immediately kicked off the board of David Protein, the protein bar that he helped found. They
Yeah.
didn't have a problem with it,
Yeah.
right? Because that's the right thing to do. Let's just fucking coalesce around the right thing to do. Because again, we've talked about this. This is the easiest one possibly in history.
At what point do our elected officials as Democrats, do I see more coming from Thomas Massey as far as movement on this stuff than I see from Democrats? And I'm like, this is important. Look, we knew the game coming in here. Everybody can't do everything all at once. And this is what it feels like happening. It feels like their strategy is working because we don't have a counter strategy. The counter strategy is that Democratic leadership meets with all of the Democrats and they're like, look, they're going to bombard us with bullshit. So here's what we're going to do. Let's break out into subcommittees. Every subcommittee is going to take on the next thing that Trump and all of his administration throw at us with 2 or 3 people. And that's going to be your focus. And once, if your thing disappears and something else comes up, there's so many different ways to handle this. But what it feels like is that our elected officials are constantly drinking from the same fire hose that we all are and trying to react to everything rather than actually creating a strategy to fight it and fight it in a fast and effective way. And this is the kind of stuff that makes me not trust government at all. Because look, this isn't even just a Democrat and Republican. It's like I respect Thomas Massey, even though I disagree with a lot of what he says, because he supports ICE and a lot of the other stuff going on. So I don't back Thomas Massey, but he's the only one that actually has the courage and balls to stand up and say what needs to be said in all of this. No other Democrat is speaking that directly and that succinctly in a way that's like emotive, right? And
Well,
this
I mean, Ro Khanna is
Ro
stride
Khanna,
by stride with Massey.
yeah. So like there's a few, but again, like what in general feels like happening is that we're being spread too thin. And the way you combat being spread too thin is that you organize and then you divvy up what happens. And we're not doing that right now. And there is a number of battles that have to be fought here. Important battles like invading Greenland shouldn't happen. Tariffs need to at some point come off because they're destroying small businesses. The Epstein files, this is a huge deal. Corruption with cryptocurrency, this is a huge deal. Venezuela, getting 300 million of the 500 million their oil sold for, while the 200 million goes to a essentially an escrow account in the Middle East for the Trump family. Like, how in God's name is this okay? Like, there is so much stuff going on right now that needs to be addressed legally and ethically that I'm like, man, yeah, there needs to be a strategy and I'm not seeing it. And that part of it just makes me feel like we're all a little bit morally bankrupt because the people that really care, like, look, me and you and listening to people talk about this stuff, I feel like oftentimes their ideas are more effective and sound like people are starting movements on their own, like Scott Galloway with, talking about, hey, let's abstain from different tech companies because they only talk like the only language they speak is money. So like maybe if some of these people start advocating because we impact their businesses, like this is the kind of stuff I want our leadership talking about. And the people that come out and start talking about it, look, I'm in. I'll follow.
Yeah, I'm a little more sympathetic because the thing about it is the flood the zone strategy is remarkably effective. Now, it depends on having so much awful shit that you're willing to throw out there that you can throw out 10 things a week.
Yeah,
Right? Like but the whole point of the strategy is that the longer a single thing stays in a news cycle, the worse it becomes. Right? Think about Burisma and Hunter Biden, right? That's fucking peanuts compared to what the Trump administration is doing. But Biden didn't have anything to take it out of the news with.
yeah,
So Trump just throws new bullshit every day at the news. Like, no, nobody thought Greenland was going to come back up, and it came back up for 10 days, and now it's gone again.
yeah.
Right. So I'm somewhat sympathetic to Democratic leadership not being able to respond to each and every outrage, but I am not sympathetic to their inability, for the most part, to simply stand on right and wrong, right? You have some guys who are really pretty good, like JB Pritzker and Chris Van Hollen and AOC and Ro Khanna and Eric Swalwell and, Adam Schiff was a little better when he was a congressperson. Uh, that where they're just out there like, no, this is some fucking bullshit. Whenever they're questioning someone, or whenever they're on a news station, they're very, very clear. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. But I don't think you can strategize this. You have to strategize winning the next election. And you
I
know,
don't
the,
know. I don't I Here's the thing. We knew this. Like we knew this from the 4 years before, and we knew their strategy going into this. Like strong democratic leadership would have been ready for this. This is on Schumer, to be
oh,
honest.
I'm not standing for Schumer here, but the strategy that's needed, and look, there's a little bit of like, I'm I know how you feel, so I'm not calling bullshit on you, but I'm going to call a little bit of bullshit on the argument because, the Democrats spent 2024 fucking screaming about this
Yeah.
from the top of every mountain. He is going to come for your elections. He is going to try to nationalize elections. He is going to arrest people who are citizens. He is going to shoot people in the streets, immigrants, right? They were shouting all of this shit. It's not that they weren't talking about it, it's that we weren't listening as a country.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're the Democratic leadership, if you're Chuck Schumer, whatever, you're a fucking old meatbag anyway at this point. But there is a little bit of like, wait a second, I thought we just spent 12 months screaming fascism and we lost an election because of it. Can we go back and scream fascism again? Yeah, I don't know if you can.
Mm.
Right? Like, because it didn't work that time.
Yeah.
Right. But I think that, to take it back to Epstein for a second, I think there's an individual component to this too. And I think, like we talked about this is a little bit what we believe this podcast is about. It's about our ability to apply our value system to the news of the day. Right. And I'm going to go back to Atia for a second because I think that he is such an interesting example, right? Like, I have no doubt that what happened to Peter Attia is around 2015, 2016, his business started to ramp up. He started to get a little more face time with a lot more wealthy people. He got invited to treat Epstein and talk about Epstein's medical situation with him. And the next thing you know, and I think he referenced this in his statement, the next thing you know, he's flying on private jets and he's invited to fancy parties. And all of a sudden, he's exposed to this lifestyle that he had only dreamed of being exposed to.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, the question, how hard is it to avoid being, getting entrapped, not entrapped, but like trapped in by Epstein and that lifestyle seems like an easy one to answer. But, maybe it's not.
Yeah.
Maybe all the wellness bros who are ready to step over Atia's carcass would do exactly the same thing if they found themselves in that situation. So the moral value based question that we need to ask ourselves, would we make the right decision here? Would we say, no, man, like, sorry, I'm not doing it. I know who you are. I saw your 2009 conviction. I'm out. And I appreciate you're not going to give me the opportunities, but my moral compass is firm on this. Now that we have seen all of this with Epstein, this question should be one that all of us are more able to ask all the time.
Yeah.
right? But I don't see again, I just don't see it happening, right? Like it's waved away as like, no, well, Trump isn't accused of a crime, and like, well, you know, blah blah blah, some mealy mouth bullshit to protect your guy, and it's like we need as a
See, but
country and as individuals to coalesce here.
yeah, I think about this a different way, and maybe this is a double-edged sword or not, but like think about it, like, dude, if OJ after he got free, his documentary was talking about how people distanced themselves so much from him. Like people didn't want to be around him, they didn't want to be seen with him. There was very few people that were actually going to spend time with OJ post everything that happened. Like so then, you know, I kind of track that with Epstein, right? Convicted, uh, gets a really light sentence, but you know, the conviction is there. People know what he does, and there is no level of distancing from these people. We talked about this a little bit. You brought up the question, like, what if, somebody brought a $5 million house to me, and then that $5 million house, I went to a few parties, turned into a few $10 million houses, and now I'm in this circle, and my income is starting to rely on these people, and I start to find out there's some terrible stuff going on. Like, yeah, that puts me in a moral conundrum for sure. And to be honest, there's probably times in my life that I maybe go along with it for my own personal gain. I can say as an adult now, I don't think there's any way there's not an amount of money that I think that would satisfy my soul enough to be okay with anybody doing child rape. But like I can understand the sentiment and the fear behind, missing out on opportunities and, spending so much time to be ambitious and working towards something. But you're right. Our value system is off when when we're so focused on, running, line cooks working at Mexican restaurants out of our country rather than billionaires that are raping children because we idolize money so much.
Maybe. But that like that's the question. That's the thing about this is like as an individual sitting here, right? I am outraged at the allegations and I watch on, social media all the outrage about the allegations, which is well placed and fucking easy. If you're not outraged by it, you're just a soulless monster. You're probably in the fucking files.
Yeah,
You know, the opportunity that we all have is to say to ourselves, not in conversation with our friends, because it's not a conversation we'd ever have. It won't be honest if you're having it with anybody but yourself, I don't think. When I see the $49 million penthouse in the Pencil Tower overlooking Central Park in Manhattan, when I see those videos and when I see Selling Manhattan and all that shit on Netflix, I can ask myself, would I associate with Jeffrey Epstein to get that?
yeah,
Knowing like we now have this, instead of like, oh yeah, of course I would become part of this like secretive cabal of people. That would be amazing and awesome. What does that mean? Like I get on private yachts and I go to some islands and shit like that. And there's no detail, there's no meat to it. Now that there's some meat to it, right? Like, and I think, it's worth saying the vast, vast, vast majority of really rich and powerful people are not in the files, right? So
yeah,
probably it's probably 100 to 1 the people who were invited to associate with Epstein in this manner who declined, who were smart enough to decline, right?
yeah,
But now we see enough of the type of people who say yes. And we
yeah,
see how they've interacted with us in our lives. We see what we've elevated these people to, the Bill Gateses, the Ehud Baraks, the Richard Bransons of the world, the Peter Attias of the world, right? We can see what we've elevated them to. And we can say, would I elevate myself to that level if this is what it meant? It's the deal with the devil bargain, right? Like,
yeah,
and this one it just seems like an interesting question. And I don't think that we're demanding the correct answer of our leaders, because if we're not all demanding that CBS can Atia, we're just not. There's 100 doctors who can say the same shit that Atia does.
yeah,
Okay. He is not a magician. Uh, so if we're not demanding that, and if we're not just at least saying to ourselves, like, what would I do? Money's tight. What would I do? My kids are going to college. If this were the opportunity, would I swallow the opportunity and say no based on my moral compass, or would I do what Peter Tia did and like, hide what I knew? Uh,
Yeah.
because yes, there's a right or wrong answer to that question in the abstract, and I believe that there's a right or wrong question to that in the individual case too. But it's a really interesting and valuable thought experiment, if nothing else, that I think all of this really exposes.
Yeah. What do you think about the Clintons testifying? Do you think that moves the needle at all?
We'll see what they say.
Yeah. That was my sentiment. This doesn't force them to open discovery though, right?
No, no.
Well, yeah. I'm curious to see how this all pans out. Like is that a are the Clintons doing this just to save face? Because, I will tell you this, based on Bill's history and the amount of times he's been there, sure as sure as shit feels like he was participating pretty heavily. And if that's the case, bro, you got to go too.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I'm sure that their initial reticence to testify was that they don't want to embarrass that Bill doesn't want to be embarrassed again.
Yeah.
And they're just fucking tired of being Clintons at this point. Uh, but I think that they're smart in demanding that it be public. And I think that there's some risk to the Republicans, that they rug pull a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't see why Republicans honestly would want them to testify so badly. It seems like that's a high risk play.
Yeah, because I mean, Bill was at the same parties Trump was at. So, like there's a good chance that some of the stuff that he could say could be far more damning to the people around him. But, I don't know what is in the files. The last part of this, and we can end here, is that, and this is the part of all of this that is so damning to me, is that, dude, there's documentaries about this. This whole thing has been incredibly well documented. There is potentially thousands of victims, but you know, under 100 that have been able to vocally come out, and a few that have already passed away from some pretty odd circumstances. So like there's some smoke around, like heavy smoke around all of this. And furthermore, every single one of Jeffrey Epstein's residents, including his island, was had cameras all over it. There is video out there of all of this, everything that's happened. So there are people right now that have seen everything, and those people have made the conscious decision to keep that and or not come public with it because their lives have been threatened, or there's other things at play. And this is the very thing that everybody was worried about. This is the very thing that everybody is like stressed about, is like, dude, is what countries, what people have information on highly ranking people that they can use against them and blackmail. And all of this feels a lot like a very toxic, like, group of people that have done some messed up shit, and they all know it, and they're all now trying to protect each other because it's the only way all of them don't get uncovered.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the media should absolutely like. I don't think for one second that the Trump administration should be able to simply say, "Cool, we gave you 3 million, we're holding 3 million, you're not getting it, game over," and people buy it, right? Like the steady drumbeat of release the Epstein files got us this far. It has to not stop. Why on earth the
Yeah,
shit that they're not releasing? Right? It's not to protect the victims because they did not redact the victims' names.
correct.
So it's not to it's not out of some goodness of their heart to protect the victims. Uh, so I think that the media should absolutely never, ever, ever stop banging this drum. The other thing, though, is like maybe all that shit that you want is already out. Maybe that's just the victim statements, right? And what you're really saying is, what if everything that they alleged is true? Then what? Right?
Yeah,
Because, it might simply be that, yeah, the circle might have been close enough, small enough that the people doing the crimes, they're not going to turn on each other. but that the people they were doing the crimes on have already turned.
Yeah.
And we're just not listening.
Look, I've been through a situation in my life where I've been accused of things I didn't do. Um, and that is it's a really shitty position to be in. What I will say is that when that thing happens, the if as soon as questions start getting asked, holes get poked all over it, right? Like it's the second anybody started asking questions about what I was being accused of, it became apparently clear that I was not I did not actually do those things. And so one, I know what that feeling of like being accused of something you didn't do feels like, but two, the for people to actually do this, to come out and say somebody in a very high position in life anywhere, like world leaders, did this thing to me, takes a level of courage that that you're basically potentially signing your life away at that point, right? And I I do not for a second believe that there is not a lot of fire behind this smoke, because there is zero reason for any woman to come out and do this if it's not true. Like, and I can tell you right now that the going after money thing in this type of situation, look, people don't pay off people that are full of shit. You just don't do it. Like, there's
There
no
there there are decades of allegations from thousands of people.
correct.
It's not all bullshit.
It's not. So like that's where I think that's a good place to leave and for today's episode, because, we can go on forever with my feelings about this, which I don't think are that important, but I do think it's important to lay out like, man, like this is a fight that should not be over, and it should not be over until we see the people that are in the videos and writing the emails and the people that have hurt women, until they're behind bars and have lost everything they own. This should not stop. So it's just how it goes for me. So,
Yeah.
well, who are we telling to shut the fuck up today, Owen?
Yeah, so fuck the normal caveat. We are preemptively telling all of MAGA to shut the fuck up the next time they're not in power. All of you. If you are still somehow putting on your fucking red hat, okay, and standing behind this guy, then the next time there's a Democratic president and the next time the Democrats are in power, you have to shut the fuck up about everything. Because what on earth are you going to scream about that you haven't already accepted? Corruption? Oh, no problem. Right? UAE owns 49% of Trump's cryptocurrency company. And a month later, we gave them the most secretive, top secret AI chips that we have, 500,000 of those chips. Right? Qatar invested a couple billion in Jared Kushner's fund. They get to open up an airbase in Idaho, and they give Trump a plane. The Bitcoin, sorry, not Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency scam, corruption, clearly not something that you give a shit about, right? Uh, the Constitution, you don't care about that either, right? We're done with the First Amendment. We've established that. Don't care about the Second Amendment either, because Janine Pirro was on record the other day saying, like, if you come into the district, meaning District of Columbia, with a gun, we're going to take it from you. So clearly, you're good with that one. The Third Amendment, quartering of soldiers, right? You seem annoyed, MAGA, that soldiers can't stay in people's houses in Minneapolis. You certainly seem annoyed that some businesses don't want them there. So I'm not sure how you feel about the Third Amendment. Fourth and Fifth Amendment, we know you don't give a shit about that, right? I could go on and on and on. 10th Amendment, states' rights. None of this shit matters to you now. So don't turn around later and tell me that it matters when you think that a Democrat is somehow, in their totally weak sauce way, violating any of this shit. Okay?
Yeah.
You have now proudly given up any and all ability to stand with credibility on any outrage whatsoever. Murder? Nope. You guys just murdered 2 people in Minneapolis. We just spent an hour talking about pedophilia. White collar crime? Come on. Pardoning of criminals? No problem. Just pay enough money, right? All this shit is fine. Election integrity, you don't give a shit about that. January 6th was a peaceful protest at the Capitol, not a fucking riot and an insurrection designed to overturn an election. You don't care at all about election integrity. So, preemptively, MAGA, because I really hope it's coming in 2026, and I sure as fuck hope it's coming in 2028. When you're out, you have nothing left. You cannot credibly claim to be annoyed about any of these perceived violations that you might see in the future. You've given it all up, which might be why MAGA needs so desperately to hold on to power. But on an individual level, if you're still backing this guy, if you're the mom and dad from the necessary conversation, okay, you have given it all up. You have no credibility ever again. Because all we have to do is point to something that Trump did, because it is all so egregious, so open, and so far beyond anything that's ever happened in American history, and so anti-constitutional, that what can you possibly be outraged about when the electoral power has shifted in the other way? So, preemptively, I will enjoy 6 years, 2026 to 2032, of fucking silence from MAGA.
And I will enjoy coming back and pulling these clips up to make sure that we have record of doing all that.
I will stand proudly on that.
Yeah. It's true though. If you still support this in its current form, look, I don't know that I will not. That'll be my first question out of your mouth. If you, I'm like,
Yeah,
where did you stand? Like early 2026, like, I mean, even end of 2025. Look, I can give grace for people that bought into the lies of Trump before he got into office, and that have spent time trying to figure out if the things he said were actually going to transpire, or if it was going. But the key points, even, like bringing fundamental things, like bringing prices down, making things more affordable, like he's done none of that, and just continued to blame Biden's economy while he's upended the entire thing. So like, even at like a core foundational level, he has not followed through. They didn't, they didn't bring the deficit down at all. Like they're spending more than ever. Like none of the things that foundationally should have happened. So I'm with you on that.
yeah, the window for me has shifted from like, how could you vote for this guy? Because like, okay, I can see immigration policy and affordability and all that. Yeah, absolutely. To how in the world, like why is there 1% of support for this guy besides shame?
Yeah.
That besides shame.
Yeah.
That's it. Why is there 1% of support for this guy?
I was talking to my buddy today at lunch, and I was saying like, yeah, it's interesting. This is like celebrating the championship of a team that cheated. Like if you're a fan of a team and like the Houston Astros were like cheating at the same time, and you're like, I don't care. Like I just wanted my team to win. I don't care if what they were doing. Your cheating's fine. Like I don't give a crap. Like if that's who you are as a person, because if you're cheating, the truth is you didn't actually win. You're playing a different game if you're cheating. So like the people that are still supporting this are going to support it no matter what, because there's no values around anything that they're doing. They don't want an honest victory. They don't want honest change. They just want, their guy to be the guy and to feel like other people lost. And that part of this culture, I'm over. I'm like, man, like, can we just get through that? And so we can all start to like, we're all actually at the core. I think the majority of Americans want the same things. And I'm still going to hold firm to that. We just have different ideas on how to get there. And that's something that should be celebrated, not something that we should look at the other side and tell them that they're bad. And so, like, obviously excluding crimes, but like,
Yeah.
having
I
different
mean, I do
takes on
think,
political policies, that's something we can deal with. Having a
yeah, let's
different take.
argue homeless policy.
Yes, having a different take on child pedophilia and rape, that there's no arguing that. If you're not on
Yeah.
one side of that, sorry, we're not the same.
But I do think I'll close optimistically too. I do think that more and more people are just like, now it might not be about policies. It's not a shift to liberalism. Right, but I think there is just a growing feeling of like, no, we really fucked up, and our next shot to unfuck this is 2026 in November, and we're gonna start to unfuck it then. I do believe that, so hopefully.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. All right, what are we talking about next week, Elwyn?
I was thinking actually election interference.
All right.
And like voter fraud as a problem and solution, and fucking election interference.
I love it. So next week, for all of you loyal listeners, tune in to our voter fraud election interference episode. It's going to be a banger.
In which we tell you how to commit voter fraud.
Yeah, I'm asking ChatGPT as we speak. Have a good week, y'all.
You too. Yeah.